I'm Mark Gagan and welcome to a special episode of The Voice of Insurance, produced in association with Imaginera. Today's guest is a senior treaty underwriting executive with such a strong technical and systems background that he ended up joining a firm dedicated to solving his sector's problems. Bevis Tetlow is CEO of Imaginera, a business that produces specialist IT systems specifically designed for the big-ticket end of the market. Imaginera is also a highly specialist IT consultant to the industry. Bevis is one of us and speaks our language, and that's what makes this exchange so accessible and valuable. Here, we dissect the world of workbenches and how state-of-the-art systems designed for reinsurers and other high-level specialist underwriters should look like in 2024. We also get Bevis's views on where the next developments in technology are likely to take the high-end underwriting and broking businesses of the future. Bevis is great company, and this podcast packs an awful lot of accumulated wisdom into the next half an hour or so. I learnt a lot, and so I think will you. Enjoy the podcast. Bevis, welcome to the Voice of Insurance.
Thanks, Mark. Good to be here.
For anyone who doesn't know you, why don't you briefly introduce yourself to our listeners? Tell us sort of a bit about your career to date and how you got to where you are.
Sure. Yes, I started my career, I've been in the industry now a while, so I think it's probably 20 odd years ago. I was at RMS.
What were you doing at RMS?
I was just a consultant out of university, so that was really my first job in the market. So yeah, and after that we actually left RMS to start a small consultancy, building software tools and pricing applications for various people in the London market. And it was really there that we got to know the guys at Hiscox, and then post Katrina, myself and the same colleague I left RMS with went out to start Hiscox Bermuda with 5 other people. So I ended up being an underwriter there for, I think, 13 odd years. I left there as a Hiscox partner and heading up the treaty team, the North American treaty team.
And then after all that, the next step was Imaginera.
That's right. So 5 years ago, I decided to try something different, see what else was out there. I didn't want to be an underwriter forever. I felt I had something else in me. And whilst I was at Hiscox, I was also in charge of the underwriting systems too. So I had a natural relationship with Imaginera because of that. And I felt like there was a really big opportunity to try and fill the gap in the big ticket market with the expertise that Imaginera had in-house. And so I felt there was a big opportunity there to leverage that with joining them.
So you were a customer?
Yeah, back at Hiscox, I was effectively the customer. So yes, they were providing services to us at Hiscox. So that's how I got to know the team there.
Well, we're old enough to remember the ad that was always on TV about the shaver, the Remington microscreen, Victor Khayyam. And he said, I'm Victor Khayyam. I was so impressed with this product, I bought the company. So you're a bit like that?
I definitely didn't buy the company. I simply joined it. But yeah, I mean, obviously, I felt that Imaginera was unique in the fact that it had a real deep understanding of the business inherently with the experience they had in the team, which I think is really key to building good software. What
was it about Imaginera that caught your imagination then?
Well, I think it was really the opportunity to fill that big ticket space. So, as a company, they were already established. So Imaginera is actually 11 years old as a company. I only joined 5 years ago. So originally started by Toby and Michelle when they came back from Bermuda, actually. So we're a company now, it was about 30 when I joined, but we're up to 16, almost 70 folk now. So there's been a lot of growth over that time. I guess it comes back to that big ticket understanding, that combining a real business understanding with technical excellence, I think, is how you build good software. And that was really the appeal. And we have effectively built that out now to have either bespoke services where we're actually helping people build their software for them. And those are sort of more partnerships with our clients. And then we are also in product now in terms of producing a product that we are licensing to the market.
It's a really good time to join a business, I must say. There were the kind of things that are near-death experiences, like running out of cash and needing to get the investors and then finally getting the first sale and then finally getting the money that comes from the first sale. It comes about 6 months later. Nice to be able to join a business when it's already proven that it's going to be a business. But then at that point, you can really turbocharge your growth, can't you? You can really go.
Yeah, definitely. I have the luxury of not starting from scratch. Imaginera was profitable business. And also the profit that we had coming from the bespoke consulting side was what really we've used to help build our product. So it's given us that runway without having to raise new capital to be able to do that.
So with Imaginera, what's the star product? What do you sell when you're out there? What's your sort of the first thing you get out of your briefcase, metaphorically speaking?
So we're increasingly moving into the product side of the world. So we have a new underwriting platform. Well, not that new. It's used by 5 markets these days called Orca. What we've done with Orca is really gone back to basics and said, if you were going to design a platform from scratch, what would that look like? If you went back to the drawing board, how would you most efficiently put together a platform that catered for all the nuances and challenges that we've seen in the past, and allow that risk to come in at the beginning from the broker, travel through the platform via integration to pricings, potentially onwards to the administration, onwards to claims, and then round again in a circle? How would you most effectively stitch that data model together and that platform together to enable that to really cater for all the nuances of big ticket reinsurance and ILS? It's a weird and wonderful business, and historically I felt there really wasn't something in the market that catered for those nuances, allowing people to do things once, do things efficiently. And really Orca is designed to do exactly that. And we've gone back to the drawing board effectively to say, how would you do this better given all our experience?
And so would you say, if someone said, oh, well, it's very much focused on that specialty in the reinsurance, the high-end syndicated world that we all know very well here sitting in London, or could it be more applicable than that, more universal?
Yeah, so I mean, Orca is, I should explain a little bit what it is as a product. So there's a lot to Orca. It's effectively a workbench, and it can be used very much as a workbench for many people. So it could be the reinsurance team, the underwriting team, the contracts team, the operations team, or it could be appropriate for a broking team too. But so really it's that organising people's day workflows around that, and then capturing that data and sending it potentially to a legacy PAS or bringing in claims data. Really what we're trying to do is bring all the data together for the underwriting team, all the workflows surrounding that, to make a single pane of glass for people. But it is also a administration system. So someone like a Conduit is using us end to end. So it's the workbench flows through to policy administration, throws through to claims. So within Orca, you can effectively run a reinsurance business.
So it's basically the idea that you log into one thing and then you don't have to keep flipping screens, doing Alt Tab to move on, and you can see everything in one place. And
yeah, that's very much what a workbench, I think, is trying to do, is to stitch together that journey for people in a way that sort of systemizes their processes.
we hear a lot about workbenches, and I'm just suspecting that some listeners might be wondering what it is. So what it is, it's a place. I always think of my workbench, there's the old Black & Decker. I'm really seem to be a real child of the late 60s and early 70s of the Black & Decker workmate sitting in my garage, that if you want to chop a bit of wood in half, this is what you get out of the garage, and it's like a vice and it's got other things. But this is where you could do everything.
Yeah, I mean, if we're trying to describe what a workbench is, I guess trying to think of a similar analogy. As an underwriter, I always thought of underwriting a bit like a jigsaw puzzle. What your job is effectively to bring together all the different pieces of that puzzle to decide whether you're going to write this risk or not. And those pieces of the puzzle, everything from your relationship to the broker, to what you did last year, to your notes, to your authorities, to how it interacts with your portfolio. So there's all sorts of pieces of that puzzle, and you're relying on a lot of different people to bring those pieces to you to make that jigsaw puzzle. And I guess in my mind, what a good workbench is allowing people to make that jigsaw puzzle faster. So you could have a more complicated jigsaw puzzle and you can build it quicker by the fact that you're able to bring those pieces into one pane of glass very quickly for the underwriter. So he's able to make better decisions quicker based on more data. Does that make sense? So it's really, that analogy of a jigsaw puzzle, I think in my mind works quite well.
Something that's really good at bringing lots of different things together, ingesting information over here, then spitting it out over there, and then or sending it to this place and then watching it change. I don't know, you get a lot of new exposure data, you send that into your pricing engine, and then the pricing engine also remembers to tell the exposure engine to say, well, yeah, if I wrote this, what would it do to my aggregate position in Florida, for example? So again, is it that kind of thing to make something fully integrated? So it does a lot of things that you don't have to think about, whereas back in the old days, we'd have done them and then thought about it afterwards, wow, I've just written this great risk, but now I'm a bit overlined in wherever. I need to go and get some FAQ.
Yeah, I think so. Certainly historically, that jigsaw puzzle was brought together in a very ad hoc manner by most people. They were checking with their portfolio over here. They were wondering what happened to their modelling over there. They were checking with the authorities over there. So there's all sorts of different things that people, I think, were doing in a fairly unorganised fashion, if you like. Like you say, it's about bringing that process together and stitching that together. And everyone's processes are slightly different. So another aspect of a good workbench is being able to match different people's business processes. And this comes back to the challenges of the market that we're trying to serve. Reinsurance is actually quite unique. Different reinsurance companies have different processes. It's not just about getting data in, it's also about how that interacts with your portfolio and other things like that in order to write that risk. So there's lots of different answers that need to be answered in order to underwrite a risk and then capture that risk efficiently to it once. And so there's a whole ton of different things that we're trying to bring together more seamlessly for people so they're effectively more efficient in what they do.
The word people always used to use was siloed, wasn't it? That people don't really talk to each other. They live in this little pond over here. They don't talk to the other people and we don't talk to them, and they probably sit in another part of the building, and literally we don't talk to each other until we have to, until someone convenes us and says, right, go into the meeting room over there and now talk to each other. Whereas here, that's all going to be happening automatically. It was also interesting what you're saying. So it's a sort of configurable system. Whereas, of course, yes, always the complaint in the old days was, oh no, we've got a new system. I have to do it this way. Otherwise, it won't let me do it. I have to do it in this order. And it's very annoying. I suppose it would be the classic. All the underwriters saying, oh, we hate our new system. And of course, but they didn't like the old one either. But if this is more configurable, you can do it more the way that you want it.
Yeah, I mean, right, totally. As an ex-underwriter, I can definitely identify with the claims team being over there and the operations team being over there and the modelling team being over there. And I think increasingly people are beginning to realise that all those actors need to work together to actually be more effective. And an underwriter needs to understand what the claims are quickly and efficiently, as well as the pricing. And so when he's going to visit his client, he has that full relationship to hand. He understands the depths of the problems in the claims team as much as he understands the issues around the pricing and the challenges that he's facing. So I think increasingly people need to think much more carefully about how they are chaining together all their different teams and all the different actors in the space that ultimately come together to be an underwriting company.
The best companies are the ones where that all happens. Absolutely.
I think it's easier said than done, but that's the aspiration, I think.
No, I think you're right. You're absolutely right. And I think, yes, in the best companies, there is that recognition that even if it's not perfect today, that has to always improve all the time, continually. So just back to that original question. So if someone asked me, oh, Imaginera, what do they do? If I said, well, it's the underwriting workbench, this is the thing that they would be known for, but obviously everything that an insurance company does at this high end and within the specialty and reinsurance space, that would probably be the right way of describing you, and you'd be happy with that?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I wouldn't label us just as an underwriting workbench company. Obviously, our legacy is basically serving all sorts of different areas in the space. We've helped the likes of Chaucer re-platform their pricing platform. They now use that for all their treaty and DNF pricing. We work with people like Securus to provide the front end to their modelling platform, all their deal management, collateral management. And people like Fidelis, we have a very big relationship with, as much more of a partnership in helping them build their own thing. So as a company, we have a lot of experience in all the different facets of a reinsurance company, from the underwriting through to the finance, through to the ILS, third-party capital. But I guess with Orca, our product, it is a workbench through to a policy administration, through to a claims platform that we're offering as a company. That's our focus increasingly.
It's really interesting that, I suppose, being the main theme is this convening of everything, of all the different parts that make an insurance company do what it does and the things it needs to do to be an insurance company. Certainly a big trend in the last few years is a recognition of ecosystems. And of course, we're in an ecosystem. Nothing happens without brokers bringing it in the first place. Everything's an ecosystem all the way through to the capital markets, to the finance, to the banking, to everything else that happens around here, and all the legal services, all the accounting services, the consulting services. And of course, the IT services are all fundamentally important to how this works. But within IT, within insurance IT, it seems to have been a recognition of that need to convene everybody, and that the client is likely to be using more than one provider. They like to have a particularly favourite ingestion tool. They like to have a particularly favourite modelling and pricing tool, or they might have an aggregation tool that they're particularly interested in. And there's that recognition that maybe you have one of your own, but they might want to use someone else's. It seems to be that if you provide an ecosystem, if you're sitting at the core of an insurance company, you need to be able to work and integrate with everyone else. It sounds like that's what you're already doing.
Yeah, absolutely. We're not asking people to throw away their legacy at all. I think in many cases, people are struggling with their legacy and looking for ways to move forward away from it and looking for a much better user experience than they currently have because of their legacy. But we absolutely are trying to stitch together that ecosystem for people. So we don't need to be the provider of all of that tech. It's about how do we be the backbone? How do we systemize that journey for people? But we have lots of different relationships, and it's about bringing together the ultimate solution, if you like. And each version of that is slightly different depending on what the client's needs are. So we would absolutely encourage those integrations, and we work heavily with a lot of different people. I think we're sitting in Southern's offices today who've been kind enough to host us. They're an example of a partner who we're working with on the more AI ingestion side potentially in the future. But we have other partnerships. We have done a lot of work with people like Finsys on the accounting side, and increasingly on the messaging side with WCL, Web Connectivity, another one of our partners. So it's about, as you say, that ecosystem, and also each of our clients has a slightly different ecosystem. So it's how do we adapt to that and make that deliver their technology journey that they want.
I think it's really healthy, isn't it? That also that recognition that perhaps you couldn't possibly do everything for everybody and still be the best at all of those things, that you've got to have some things that you're really good at, your core things. And also, sometimes even if you feel that you are the best, it's what your client wants. Ultimately, if they really like this other thing and they want to use it, then why would you not allow them to do what they want? Because it's ultimately their decision, it's their business.
Yeah, absolutely. We're here to facilitate their technology journey, not what we think it should be. And it's about, like you say, it's about that user experience. If you have a really good user experience, then the users like you and everyone's happy, and you're more likely to stick around and gain business as a result of that.
I mean, the best tools will out in the end. People will want them, won't they? They'll go, you know what, I really want that new one. My old one's not any good. People come round anyway, don't they?
Yeah, I think you can't hide from that. That ultimately people know what's better, and they gain that experience from actually using the product.
In terms of customizability, I remember having some interesting discussions about things like no code and low code, i.e. the idea that, you know, I don't need to know how to program a computer, but I can design a process myself, because I know what the process I want, but let someone else do all the coding in the background, and that could be done automatically. How far do you think things can become customizable? I've certainly spoken to people who say you could spin up a new product and a new system in an afternoon, that kind of thing, and you could migrate it somewhere else tomorrow.
Obviously, we are not a low-code shop.
No.
So I definitely think there is a lot of utility for that type of application. But I think when it comes to, I think this speaks a little bit, again, to the complexity of big ticket insurance and reinsurance, and needing a platform that's actually designed to cater for those demands, which are nuanced and different. You know, the Lloyd's market is a weird and wonderful beast. And the assumption you can throw together something very quickly that's fit for purpose, I'm not sure always comes to fruition. In our experience, what tends to happen is the 80% is done very well, very quickly, and then it comes down to the 20% remaining that really causes some blockers. And you end up really rebuilding things from scratch to cater for that 20%. So we've taken a slightly opposite approach, and we've built something that we think is exactly for purpose, but made it highly, highly configurable. So it's not low code, no code in terms of self-service, but what it is very configurable by nature, in terms of it's a product that you can change and adapt and customize. We've come at it from a different angle. You know, we've effectively designed it exactly for purpose, rather than saying, here's a system that you might be able to use, and that same system you could use to produce a footballing app as well, if you wanted.
Yeah, I suppose, yeah, you don't want to just throw a load of Lego at someone and say, you can make your own Ferrari if you want. No, I haven't got time for that. You know, I'm probably the sort of person who buys something in IKEA and then pays for people to go and come and assemble it.
Yeah, I think that's a good analogy. It's pretty tricky to build a Ferrari with Lego. And ultimately, you know, you can end up something that goes pretty slowly.
It's modular construction and configurable, but yes, it's too complicated, actually.
Yeah, the steering wheel might not turn.
Talking about making complicated things relatively simple and streamlined, it's been a really interesting process in the last few years to watch some complex underwriting decisions be automated. Interesting, you know, new syndicates at Lloyd's, interesting vehicles. You're in that business in many ways. How far do you think it could be going?
Yes, that's a good question.
We could talk about the theory, and then, of course, there's always the practice, and that's down to an underwriter. And, of course, you're a former underwriter. There's how far could it go? And, of course, how far would you actually want it to go if you were the chief underwriting officer?
Yeah, so there's a lot there. I think that what's come out in the last few years is pretty impressive in terms of the capabilities of large language models, and it's clear that they're going to be pretty influential in the future. And there will be a lot of utility, I think, for underwriting utilizing that technology. I think that a lot of that suits itself probably better to the higher volume stuff, the sort of smaller ticket business initially. So I think that probably would be where the main focus is. And the big ticket in time, you know, who knows where it might go. But I think for me, AI is about enhancing the underwriter, you know, helping underwriting teams with productivity, helping them make better underwriting decisions, process bigger data sets faster. Systems should be able in the future to, rather than looking up for the claims report, it should be able to write a prompt and say, give me the latest 20 largest losses for this client, and it should be able to tell you that. So I think it's about making underwriters more effective rather than replacing them personally. But removing those low value tasks, making triage better within that process. But I think ultimately some of these big decisions come with a lot of risk and a lot of money, and just delegating those to a machine, I'm not sure that I would sign up to that as the chief underwriting officer. And the relationship side of things are pretty important. You might get a bigger line because of your understanding of the client and the broker. And I think that's still important.
Yeah, and I suppose also it's all very well as a follow market. If you've got this yes, no, what size line, if yes, what size line, the computer's answering two questions. So yes, shall we do it? It's all been done by somebody else. Shall I follow? And if so, what line shall I offer? Whereas if it was, well, now I have to actually set the terms myself, it's slightly different, isn't it? So you're much more on the side of increasing the skill and productivity of underwriters, which is great. And obviously, if Lloyd's wants to get to 100 billion, it would be nice to have to do that without having to double the number of underwriters it's got.
Yeah, and I think there's some pretty big challenges out there in pricing too, which all come back to how people utilize big data sets. Increasingly, much more data is going to be used in underwriting and much more diverse data. And that again sits well with bringing that together with models, these sort of the large language models, such that you could potentially answer the question, how might I price in a future that, with climate change and other things like that happening? Historically, most models are driven from history. And really, increasingly, you could question whether that was a safe assumption. And if you're not going to go with that, what data are you going to use instead, and what versions of that truth are you going to look for? And also, you probably want many more answers rather than just relying on one. You probably want a range of uncertainty. And again, all that is about utilizing data well and quickly to make underwriting decisions. So all of that fits very well with that type of technology.
Yes, and I suppose it's not just our 336 years of insurance data, a lot of it, which of course is not necessarily that relevant or that accessible or that structured. But at the same time, it's that bringing in third-party data you can get from all over the place and saying, well, did you know there's a correlation between what people do on Facebook and how often oil refineries blow up? You know what I mean? But you can sort of ask yourself these questions, can't you? If you have huge, diverse data sets and you can start to look for patterns in things, and you can say, right, try and build a new underwriting philosophy and a new pricing outlook rather than using history or using whatever you've got. I suppose all data by definition is historic because it must have happened to be recorded. But a lot of it's a lot more current, isn't it?
Yeah, there's a lot of exciting things that might or might not be useful in the future, and people tend to gravitate to the shiny new. But in my experience as an underwriter, there's still a lot of people using Excel to do some pretty menial things, and getting the base data right is actually still pretty important. So I still think there's a lot of work to do in the market, actually bringing it back to the basics. Why are you capturing things in Excel when you can't bring those together as a portfolio? There's a ton of different areas like that. And each of those classes of business has very unique needs as well. So that flexibility in the system. So if you're a political risk underwriter, you capture your amortization schedule, or, each class has different requirements. So it's about facilitating that data by class and then helping them use that. And it doesn't have to be that fancy. It could just simply be allowing them to do it better.
What do you think some of the logical consequences are for this? We're speeding up this value chain. Some of it will be automated this high end. It won't be, but it will be a lot quicker. We know it's going to be quicker because we'll be able to come to decisions much quicker. We'll prioritize the decisions in a better way. We'll have all the information at our fingertips and all the different considered views, and then we'll add our own human considered view on that. It seems to be that it also will be done in a frictionless way, more importantly, let's say with all the electronic placing, when that's finally integrated across the value chain. I say finally because it's been something that I've waited my whole career for. But what do you think when it finally does happen? Because we know it's more of a when than an if, and back then it was an if. What will be the logical consequences, do you think, of this market? Would it be much more like a stock market?
So yes, I'm a little bit like you. I've witnessed a lot of people attempt to change the market and come in and say how they're going to join the investor with the homeowner, and that's going to happen tomorrow, and they're going to revolutionize things. And again, a little bit like you, probably I'm not skeptical of it because I think ultimately I'm a technologist now. I can see this changing, but I think there's a lot of vested interest and challenge to that. The reasons those things don't happen perhaps as fast as they should. I don't think it's really, in many cases, a technological problem. It's more of a business practice and process problem that's in some ways impeding some of this. But there'll be areas of the market which will change faster than others, I think. You can see a scenario where via technology and via different products, perhaps something like parametric insurance, a homeowner buying their quake insurance directly from a parametric source via technology, which is backed by a venture capital fund straight in, is obviously a very efficient way to do things. And the expenses that are involved in the current marketplace are significant. So there's a big carrot there to get that right. But at the same time, people underestimate the value that people like brokers bring to the table and what else they're doing for the client, and then how entrenched some of those processes are. So I think the market will change, but there's some low-hanging fruit there. And electronic trading is placement, I think, is just passing data around rather than the idea of you can buy underwriting like a stock. I think is probably a little bit far-fetched today.
Yes, at some point in the future, some things will be automated and we'll be able to see. But yeah, we're never going to have insurance day trading, are we? Because it doesn't work like that.
I don't think so. And I actually don't think that's what the client wants either. So if you're State Farm, you want 20, 30 people on your panel. You want consistent relationships. You want to know who they are. You want capital that you trust. And you want to know that if a claim happens that you weren't expecting, you can have a conversation with a person to say, you need to pay this, and Aon's going to lean on you to,
and there will be payback.
And there will be payback, and ultimately people will pay it because that relationship is worth it in the long run. So I do think that relationship side of it, being an ex-underwriter, is much more important than perhaps people from the outside realise.
Yes, absolutely, because you really know it's important on the day when the big hurricane is barreling towards the coastline somewhere, very fully insured. You think, I'm glad I didn't shop my program around. I'm glad I stuck with those people because I know they're going to be there. Well, I'm hoping we're all going to be there and we'll be able to ride through this together. It's interesting because you've been on the buy side as an underwriter, sort of wanted to buy new systems and look at systems, and from that as a consumer and a user of those systems. But you're now on the sell side, selling people systems and the services that go with them. What's your advice to anyone? So maybe someone's sitting looking at their green screen with a cursor flashing. What's your advice to them to know what good looks like? How would you explain to them what's the best way of going about upgrading your systems or replacing your systems today in 2024?
Yeah, so that's a good question. And it's quite a tough question because each customer...
Depends on them, doesn't
it really does depend on them to a large extent and what their current outlook is and what their current systems are and the steps that might be required. It's not just a question of ripping out something and putting something else in. You need many steps to get to that. It's always a phased approach normally. But I think one thing that I think is pretty important is to really have a pretty holistic vision of how your data flows through your organization. So, how does that piece of data, that risk, come in from the broker, interact with pricing, go through to policy administration, go through to claims, and then go round in a circle? If you can really think through that carefully, you can remove a lot of the inefficiencies that currently exist in the market. At the moment, there's still quite a lot of separation between claims and underwriting and admin, and people are putting in that data many times. They're putting it in the underwriting side, they're rekeying that in the policy side, they're keying that in the claim side, and all those data models are quite independent of each other, and really thinking through how those data models join up in the future is very important, I think. And at the moment, you still have people going out and buying a claim system without really considering what information the underwriters might need of that. And I think that more holistic view of your data and a plan that goes beyond for your whole organization, I think would be something that I would recommend. And I think a lot of people overlook at the moment.
Yes, and also that claims department, if they knew how important this was as a client, they often have to be told that this is a really important client, but they might not know until somebody else tells them.
Yeah, absolutely. And similarly, the claims team should have access to the underwriting information very quickly. They should understand what's an important client simply by access, rather than receiving a claim without any context of who it is and why they're paying it or what the bigger relationship of that client is.
Yeah, and that assessment of, yes, what was the intention and why did we get into this deal in the first place?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's key. Supporting the underwriter in that.
The world's constantly changing. People are always developing new things. Anything new on the radar in terms of what you're developing, what your people in white coats and pointy heads are working on?
Yeah, so the white coats, we try and keep them busy. We're at the point now where our base platform, really does the workbench, policy administration and claim system well. And we're increasingly looking to other areas to utilize where we can take the functionality we have today and adapt it to be more useful in other areas. So one of the focuses for next year is making sure that we can tick off the messaging angle, so the electronic messaging, bringing in submissions electronically, bringing in premiums and claims data, because that's something that the London market need in order for us to be a PAS in isolation. So at the moment, we can be a policy administration platform for someone like a Conduit in Bermuda, but we cannot because we don't currently have messaging capabilities within Orca for the London market and Lloyd's. So we're going to tick that box with WCL next year, as that partnership is going to help that. Things like outwards management, I think, is actually one of the hardest challenges out there. And that's a lot of people try and do that with limited success. And I think that with something like Orca, the data model, plus a partner like someone like Finsis, we really have the grey matter and the systems to actually do that properly. It's a very difficult thing to do, but ultimately there's a big use case there. So outwards management, things like pricing. We just signed an agreement with Moody's around being a development partner with them. How do we join underwriting and modelling better? I think there's a lot of potential there to do that within the products we bought. We've got the underwriting side, they've got the modelling side, and joining those dots so your portfolio can be automatic and part of your workflow.
What you said about outwards is interesting. Why is it so hard?
Well, outwards management, you really have to have a very solid understanding of your inwards book. So everything has to come together correctly. All those relationships are coming together to flow through into your potential outwards purchases. And so that premium and claims data coming through inherently from very different third-party capital structures and quota shares. And some of these structures are pretty convoluted and pretty complex. So, this one includes quake, this one doesn't. This one includes various classes of business, this one doesn't. All the different rules that might apply to a quota share. There is a huge amount of complexity in getting that right. And you really need the base data to be correct in the first place in order for it to flow up to the next stage, of which is outwards.
I always think of, the further up the food chain you go, insurance is somebody balancing a plank on a pipe, and then you put another one on top, and it's sort of, you see this sort of in these circus acts, and the reinsurance would be someone on top of someone else, because, the reinsurers dealing with the error that the insurers got and that margin of error, and then putting their own margin of error on top of it, and then the retro is right at the top. Now on the third pipe, on the third plank, and it gets really, this is where it gets really precarious, and the band strikes up, and all the crowd cheers when you get it absolutely right without it collapsing.
Yeah, that's a good analogy. So, ultimately, to get outwards right, you need to make sure that guy right at the top has got the right numbers, and that therefore is a big challenge.
A small deviation is magnified by the time it gets that far.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's probably one other area that we're probably going to focus more on as well, is that the broking space. So I think there's a lot of value in what we're doing at the moment. What we're doing for an underwriting company, really, there's so much overlap with what a broker needs. Ultimately, they have workflows, they have data, and all the data the underwriter wants really is coming from the broker in the first place most of the time. So the broker has the same challenge of organizing that data, organizing their workflows, sending it out to multiple markets, tracking that, prioritizing that, and keeping on top of that. So that's really an angle that we're looking to any brokers out there.
And they've got to try and just give advice and design a program based around what's there. Again, I suppose if they had good software, it would really help them.
And understand, what happened last year, why did we do that, how's the data changed, all those sorts of answers that they're expected to provide need to be somewhere, tracked somewhere and systemized.
These days in the world of technology, it's going to be the broker's job to sort of partly reverse engineer everything that the insurer, reinsurer, retro sessionaire is doing.
Yeah, and they are.
Yes, but at the same time, but you can't be on top of that unless you absolutely are on top of it.
Yeah, there's a lot of people still staring at their Outlook inbox and hoping their emails organise themselves. And there's a lot of companies who, let's say your key broker leaves, what did he do last year, what was in his inbox tends to get lost. And as a company, you're wasting a lot of that IP by letting that happen. Really, all that relationship should be in a system that includes, your CRM and the rest of it.
I suppose it comes to the end of my questions. Other than the last one, you're in an entrepreneurial organisation, relatively young. What sort of business is this that you're building? I talk to different types of entrepreneurs. Some, I think, they want to build something that they could sort of pass on to their grandchildren type. That's one of their prime motivations. But others are maybe a sort that love solving problems, and then once they've kind of solved that problem, not to say they get bored, but they find another problem that consumes them, and then they move on, and then that's normal, and then they hand the business on to someone else. Say, I've really loved proving difficult concepts, and then moving on to prove another difficult concept, because that's what I do, and then I'll let someone else be the operational person or the person who could then grow that new business. What sort of entrepreneur are you?
Gosh, that's a good question. With Imaginera, Imaginera is much bigger than me. I am just a cog in the wheel. We have 60 plus people working at Imaginera these days, and we have many experts and high quality people. So Imaginera will outlive me many years, and really we're trying to build something that's sustainable. A lot of these relationships are very long, so that partnership with our clients is huge. So we're absolutely trying to build a business that has longevity, and my place in that. Hopefully I can contribute as much as I can towards that journey. But the ultimate goal is to build a business that is ultimately the best in class at servicing the needs of the big ticket space with products and services.
And if you do that, then it looks after itself.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think
go on forever.
The talent is within the team. It's nothing to do with me. The real hard work, it gets done by the people actually having to execute on this.
Well, Bevis, thank you so much for your time. I've really enjoyed learning all about Imagine. Now, the other thing I need to learn is it Imaginera or Imaginera?
Imaginera.
Imaginera. Excellent. Okay. Thanks very much for telling me all about it and having a much wider discussion than I was expecting at the beginning. Thank you so much.
Absolute pleasure. Thanks for your time.
Well, I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you did, don't forget to subscribe or leave a like or a review or recommendation on whatever podcast platform you used to access this programme. These really help get the word out. Before we go, just a quick reminder that advertising slots are available here and in other places in the Voice of Insurance podcasts. Podcasting is the fastest growing medium and attracts a high quality audience of key decision makers. It's also an intimate medium where you, the listener, are right in the room with me and the interview subjects. Needless to say, that means it's a great way of getting your message out directly to an audience because you know you've got their full attention. It's also very cost effective. So get in touch with Mark at thevoiceofinsurance.com to find out how you could be speaking directly to the industry. Voice of Insurance is produced by me, Mark Gagan. Music was written by Anna Gagan and produced by Carlos Gagan. Check out more podcasts and written comment pieces at www.thevoiceofinsurance.com.